Welcome to Empowering Workplaces, the podcast where we explore how to create more meaningful, fulfilling, and productive work environments. I'm Sanja, an organizational psychologist, and we'll be talking with leaders, experts, and innovators who are shaping the future of work and sharing their stories on how we can all contribute to building a workplace where everyone can thrive. Whether you're an HR professional, a leader, or just someone who cares about making work better, I'm glad you're here. Today on Empowering Workplaces, I'm thrilled to welcome Rob Kalwarowsky. Rob is a coach, a speaker, an MIT-trained engineer, a former NCAA academic All-American, and so much more. Several months ago, he published a book called Capitalizing on Chaos, The Executive's Guide to Succeed in Disruption, and it's already a bestseller. In his book, Rob argues that while external chaos, such as AI, layoffs, market shifts, is inevitable, a leader's greatest challenge and opportunity is managing the internal chaos of their own mind. Listen in closely. We're about to share a lot of great advice in this episode. Rob, welcome to Empowering Workplaces. So I recently finished reading your book, and it is absolutely incredible. I keep telling you that. And I can't wait to share more with our listeners about it. But before we get started, can you please tell us a little bit more about yourself and what brought you to write this book, which is equally well-researched and quite personal as well?
I mean, you know, Sanja, the personal journey led me to the research, which led me to the book. And so, yeah, Sanja told a little bit about it. So I'm born and raised Ottawa, Canada. I started playing water polo really early in my life. And I learned that classic narrative of do well in school, try to get into the best university so you can get that job. So then you can get married, 1.5 kids, white picket fence, and a golden retriever, and you'll be happy. And so I took that to heart. I did well in school, did well in water polo, was on the Canadian junior national team, got into MIT, graduated with a mechanical engineering degree, and got a job in mining in Western Canada, and I was off to the races. First year I worked in mining, I saved my company tens of millions of dollars, and I was like, wow, I am rolling. Mm-hmm. And I ran smack dab into a toxic manager. Micromanager, passive aggressive. And then also at the time, I didn't realize this, but he was also trying to people please his boss. So decisions would change like we see someone's tweets changing things on the daily today. And for me, as somebody who needed to perform as it was my identity, it's basically like trying to shoot at a net where you, one, are blindfolded, and two, is you don't know where the net's going to be. And so you never hit anything. And that was catastrophic to who I thought I was. And that started questioning myself of like, why can't I succeed in this environment? What's wrong with me? And then ultimately, who am I? And that was a slippery slope into depression. And ultimately in 2013, I tried to take my own life.
Wow.
And we're taught, you know, and for folks who see me, right now, I'm sitting here, my background, I'm in Costa Rica, right? And we're taught in the movies, hey, when you hit rock bottom, that's the moment where you quit your job and you become a surf bum in Costa Rica, right? In reality, that didn't happen for me. I actually woke up the next morning and I got dressed and I went to work because that high achieving robot that I was took back over and was like, you are nothing if you don't achieve, if you don't win, if you don't make money, if you don't have a job. And that controlled me. And that was the inner chaos that took me on a journey for basically another 7-8 years before I was able to get underneath it and transform into who you're talking to today. And that journey of transformation led me to pivoting into coaching because I didn't want anyone else to experience the pain that I felt because of this leadership. And as you can tell in the book, is 65.1% of the workforce experiences a destructive leader.
Mm.
So that means you're twice as likely to have a bad boss than a good one. And so that's why what we do is so important, is because if we can create better leaders, people feel better, and both mentally, but also physically, because there's a Stanford study that states that 120,000 deaths per year are caused by the ways that companies manage their people. That makes management, or bad management, the fifth leading cause of death in the United States. That's why we got to make a difference.
It's so incredible and it's so powerful. And when you share the statistics, to me, it's so heartbreaking, because a lot of times when I think about our profession and making things better, my mind goes from, taking it from neutral to something good. But what you share in the statistics is we're generally not a neutral, we're in a hole. And with managers, I was just having a conversation, even as, as we're going into 2026 and looking at everything AI related. And there's now some academic studies showing that leaders or managers are like the mediating factor in how you handle AI. And I was like, oh my goodness, like another thing on leaders and managers, like there's still more for us to dig out and help them with. And now we're going to put one more thing that they're going to be like largely responsible for. Like it's a ticking time bomb. And so that those stats are really actually sobering, because again, to me, it's like, oh, I know things aren't great, but wow, like just. And then probably when you anecdotally talk to people, almost everyone's had a pretty crappy boss at some point in their life, unfortunately. So they're like, oh, okay, I see the stats. I believe in that. Wow.
Here's the thing. It's not your fault. When I talk about in the book, and that's a study that I got as an academic paper from Sweden, they document the 6 different types of destructive leaders.
Yeah.
We all have all 6 of them inside our own heads.
Mm-hmm.
And typically 1 to 3 of those are going to be more dominant than others. But it doesn't really matter. We all feel stress. The environment that work is in is incredibly demanding at this point, and has been for the last, I don't know, since I've been working, right? And it only gets more demanding, especially with the rate of AI, the geopolitical situation where who knows what's going to happen, right? The economic situation where many of us are living paycheck to paycheck, right? You're under this stress and this chaos. And what that triggers in your mind is the stress response, the fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. That stress response turns you into one of those 6 destructive leaders in your own mind first. And we all feel it. We all get that thing. We make a mistake in an email, and it's ourselves that are banging on ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
But the switch is, if you can find compassion for those parts of you that are trying to help you, but they're actually berating you, one is you'll get happier. You'll create that environment around you, both for your family and for your workplace. And that's the switch that takes the performance to the next level.
Yeah. And can you tell us a little bit more about what the destructive 6 leadership styles are, for somebody who hasn't read your book yet?
Yeah. So it ranges, right? So on the actively destructive side, we have the arrogant and violent boss, which, just imagine Gordon Ramsay on Hell's Kitchen when someone gives him, an undercooked chicken, right?
Yeah.
It's like he yells and screams, he throws the dishes. It's like it's all about him. There's a lot of deflecting blame, there's a lot of abuse. Thankfully, only 5.5% of the workforce has a boss like that. The next level down to that is what's known as the abusive narcissistic boss. And you can think of the role that Leonardo DiCaprio plays in Wolf of Wall Street, right? So it's all about him. It's all about, I'm taking credit, I'm deflecting blame, and I'll make threats and punishments, but it's all about me. 19.5% of the workforce, I think actually 19.7% of the workforce has a boss like that. So in total, we're talking 25% of people have an actively abusive manager. So that's a lot, right? The other end of the spectrum is what's known as passively destructive. So you have the one that's the least, which is called a cowardly boss or a ghost manager. These are people who don't want accountability or responsibility for anything. Think about me when it's time to file your taxes, right? So I avoid doing my accountant every year, and I love him because he does this. He sends me an email and he goes, "Rob, are you going to file your business taxes with me this year?" And I'm like, "Yes." And then 2 months later, he goes, "Rob, I'm still waiting for your information." Right? And it's like there's a part of me that just doesn't want to engage in that. And it's like I do need to work on that, but it's like we see this in the workplace. And often it's like it's some version of like imposter syndrome where you feel like maybe, and I see this a lot with folks where it's like you're within a team and you get promoted and everybody else is at the same level. And then now you hear these thoughts of like, why did you get promoted? Maybe, Sanja should have got promoted, not you. Or Sanja has more expertise. She's been working in this system for 20 years and you just kind of knew, you don't really know it. And so you defer.
Yeah.
And so we see that a lot, right? The other passive side is what's known as the messy boss. And sometimes this is a training issue. Sometimes it's like the person has never learned how to properly delegate or properly manage people. So they don't know how to give a task, they don't know how to give instructions, or they're just like, maybe they don't know how to manage projects. Those are things. Other times it's that same thing. I don't the voice inside my head says, "Hey Rob, you shouldn't be telling them what to do." And so then it's like things like I don't give you clear expectations. I don't set deadlines. I flip-flop on decisions. I'm trying to people please. So I'm trying to I'm asking your opinion, I'm asking their opinion, and I'm changing what I'm saying. All in all, both of those are I think they're roughly 15%. And so that's 40%. And then, the 25% in the middle, we're talking about they're the mixed types. And so you have the passive aggressive bosses, which I don't have to explain what passive aggressive is. And then you have the passive egocentrics, which are I take all the credit and I deflect blame, but I do it behind your back.
Mm.
So there's the 6.
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you for going through, because I think for people it maybe it helps understand, one, that they're not alone, but then two, like what kind of like personality that they're dealing with, and like how it could actually be harmful. Lot to process there. So my next question, I have so many from your book. We'll see how many we can rock through in our time together. So you talk about a 2-word reset, which I found fascinating. Can you tell our listeners what is a 2-word reset and why does it work?
Yes. So as I mentioned, right, we're naturally non-destructive leaders, or that's what the research calls us. But I would say good leaders, right? We're nice people. We're all trying to do our best, and we're trying to show up. And we're not cruel to people. There's like 1% of the world are sociopaths, right? But like 99% of people are doing their best. They're good people, right? And so it's stress that causes us to fall into these traps. And that is those stress response. And so when we get caught in that stress response, it leaves our brain with basically four choices: fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. And for folks out there, fawn is just a word that starts with F that means to people please or to suck up, right? But those are the 4 that don't make us good leaders. And we fall in one of those 6 categories. And so the easiest way to just get out of that stress response is just take a deep breath and just say to yourself, I'm human, and acknowledge that stress, that fear, that uncertainty, and that'll help bring it down. And then you can choose next what's your best behavior. And this is a tool that you can use for yourself. I also teach it and I use it. So let's say you were working together, Sanja, and you came to me and you're like, how are you doing today, Rob? Maybe I just got off the phone with my biggest client and they're like, Rob, we're cutting costs, we're cutting you.
Yeah.
And I could say to you, Sanja, I'm human. And then you know that I'm not in my best place and you can respond with empathy. Whether that's, hey, Rob, I'll give you 5 minutes, or it's like, hey, do you want me to listen? What do you need from me?
Yeah.
The inverse is you can use it on me. You see me, I got off the phone, my face is red, maybe you can tell I'm upset. You can say, hey, Rob, you're human. And the same reaction happens. It triggers that self-awareness in me that sometimes I can lose, right? And so the cool part is you can make this tool your own. So in August, I actually taught this tool to a Fortune 500 tech company in San Francisco, and they were like, hey, we're going to use Cheesecake Factory as our code word. And so, yeah, the double chocolate peanut butter cheesecake's not great for our waistline, but it's great for teamwork.
Yes. Well, and that was actually going to be my question. I love that you say that. So there is, because I know in your book you talk a little bit more about on the individual level. And for a lot of our listeners, it might be in an HR department or culture department and thinking about, is there a way that we could implement this organizationally? And so what I'm hearing you say is that whether you use the word I'm human or a different terminology, for there to be some kind of like communication or training where there is that code word. And it's actually, I'm sure you've heard her talk about it. It's reminding me a little bit of the examples that Brene Brown gives when she talks with her husband. And when she says, okay, today I'm at 20% or today I'm at so they know where to meet each other. And there is, I know a lot of times I'll talk to people and the first thing I'll ask them is very genuinely, how are you? And the number of times people have been like, we don't even have time to address that in this conversation. And so you're like, enough said, I get it. But I don't know if that's like normalized. And I especially think maybe it's shifting a little bit, but I know like in American culture, a lot of times like it's, how are you? I'm fine.
Yeah.
And I mean, a lot of times we're not fine. We're just not. Maybe we're at different degrees of not fine, but we're not like, oh, amazing. Let's move on with the conversation. So I love that example that you gave, that it can be used organizationally and it can be their own word. Like maybe that's something that like really aligns with the culture or something that feels very true to them. And is a commonly shared, like maybe like a ritual that people can say. And as soon as they do, you know what somebody's talking about.
Yeah, it's the how are you is, and I think this goes beyond, North American, because I've mentioned this to Australian folks and to folks in India and in Europe, right? And it's very much this performative, yeah, I'm good. Right? And so when I used to work with folks, well, I mean, I never did a lot of mental health, but like when I interact with folks in like a mental health context, often what I was told was, instead of saying, how are you? It's, are you safe or are you okay? And so it
Mm,
changes the context of the question. Of course, that's different at work, right? But it's like using a word or a phrase in your organization that you can set yourself. And even if it's just your team, right? Like that team at the company, it was only like a team of 10 of them. So it's
yeah.
like they can use it within their department team. And then another team could have their other, they could say, like Olive Garden, right?
Yeah, right. Oh, that I could imagine that being funny if everyone has a different word and someone says something and I'm like, oh, banana. Like, what? Did you have a banana for lunch or what's going on? No, but I love that because you have your circle and you have your word. And so I hope people are taking note because I don't see that as often practiced in organizations. And I feel like it's something that's relatively easy to at least experiment with, if not the whole organization at once, like with a group or a team.
It
Um,
starts with trust and psychological safety, right? Because if you don't have that, then no one will ever say I'm human,
yeah.
right? Because then it'll be like, and I get this question all the time, right? Is like an executive will come to me and they'll be like, I have a Machiavellian person who's another executive. They're trying to cut my legs out because they want that promotion. What do I do
Mm,
about it? And it's like, well, you can't share anything with them, right? And it's like, that's a very common experience at those high levels because just as I mentioned, 1% of the population is sociopaths in executive levels, that climbs to somewhere between 3 and 5%. And
Yeah.
so the folks that do progress, typically they are on that abusive narcissist side or they're in the sociopathic side. And we see this across many spaces. um,
Yeah.
but it's like you have to start there with your team. And then
Mhm.
that's when you can get into these things about vulnerability. And like, of course, you as the leader, you have to exhibit the vulnerability first. So then you can open that space for your team to be vulnerable with you. And again, we
Yeah.
get into these dynamics where, um, especially now with a global workforce, like there are cultures like Japan or India or um, various cultures where the power distance or the power gap is large, and they will never share
Mhm.
with you. And you
Yeah.
just have to expect that as a leader and understand.
Yeah. Well, then it's how do you set yourself up to get the right information? I think a big part is, I mean, good, like just the number of times that psychological safety has come up today in my world is very telling, how important it is. But to your point, also understanding those cultural differences, and knowing that maybe to get to the right information, the information that you need as a leader, as an individual, as an organization needs to be different depending on who you're interacting with. And I think a lot of times I've worked for some US based companies first in the past. And maybe that's changed a little bit now, but to me, it was surprising with how much of US mentality a company would come in and just assume it'll work like that everywhere else. And it's like, oh, my friends, you have no idea. But how do you open up somebody's eyes to it to realize how much they're actually missing out because they're just assuming everybody thinks, behaves, shares the same way they do?
100%. And like I example for this, I worked with a large telecom company, and one of the leaders last year, he was based in Germany, and
Yeah.
he was leading a team in India, and he was trying to get his team to leave work at 5:30. And like they're a global team, right? So they're based
Yeah.
all the way from India to San Francisco. So literally you could work 24 hours a day and somebody
Yeah.
on your team will be online, right? And he was like, I want my team to take care of themselves because I
Mhm.
value their health and their wellness and these things. And he recorded a video of himself speed skating with his kids at 5:30. And he said, I leave Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 5 so I can go speed skating with my kids at 5:30. I want to show you this. And so it's like a 2-minute video or something. But it's like there were people in India and he would log on at 5:30 his time, which in India is like at night, and he would be telling his team to go home.
Yeah.
And yet, even though he was demonstrating it as a leader, they still have their own mindset and their own conditioning that they had to
Yeah.
work. And so just as a leader, I want to give you compassion out there is like you can do as much as you can do. There are still folks that you will never overcome their own internal mindset. And as a
Yeah.
coach who does a lot of mindset work, I
Yeah.
can bring you to the water. I can't force you to walk on the journey or to drink, right?
Yeah. Oh, it's a great point. I've talked about that too. So I've been in the workforce, for about probably 25 years or so. And when I first started working, like I always say this, like burning the midnight oil was a badge of honor and it was very structured work hours. And I find myself, I'm a huge proponent of flexibility and I'm a huge proponent of trust. But because my career started out that way and that's how I went for a while, sometimes like if I go to a doctor's appointment or I step out to do something during the day, there is this like underlying almost like pang of guilt where I'm like, am I doing something wrong? I still go and I overcome it because I know what the cause of it is. But I'm like, man, I can't wait for the day where I'm just like feeling good about this. It's like not in the back of my mind, but
We'll
it
have
is
a
that
call, Sonia. I'll help you with
I
that.
know.
I can
Thank
help you
you.
with
Thank you. Oh,
that.
I'll give you like numbers of all my therapists that I worked on through my life on this. But I think just, that awareness, but also to your point, to tell leaders that I love your example and I love this person living through their behavior and really sharing that. But then also being attuned enough to know that maybe that's not enough. And the people are like, okay, but like, are you sure? Like, is this still okay? And I might need to do this. Kind of along the lines of that, but maybe a slightly different gear. I want to talk about toxic positivity. And one kind of funny thing is like, you know me a little bit now. We chatted a few times. Like I come across as like, like I'm an optimist. Everything's great. And I realized over time that I was giving this weird impression to people. They're like, you do it all. You're perfect. Life. And I'm like, hold on. Because if you were thinking any of this, like you
I'm
clearly
falling
don't know me well
apart.
enough. Like I'm a basket case. And so I started very proactively sharing a lot of things that were going on in my life because I work hard. I've done stuff, but like I've like never want somebody to think like, oh, she's perfect and she's got it all figured out. And so I didn't know if I was like leaning into some, toxic positivity unintentionally. And then I learned the value of like being vulnerable, being very proactively sharing different things and sharing it with my team, and oftentimes sharing it publicly, just so I don't get the wrong persona out there, or like I give people the wrong impression. And I think there probably are still people though that feel like, no matter like if everything around them is falling apart, they're like, it's fine, everything is going to be fine, it's great. Like this is, and that doesn't help people because you're like, oh man, well, I'm miserable. How is this person like, yeah, let's go. In your work, how do you get people like to learn the value of vulnerability, to learn that actually toxic positivity is not going to be that helpful, that you're not the cheerleader, you're not the rah rah rah, but there's actually some pretty big negative consequences to it.
The first thing, right, is to deconstruct where it's coming from, right? And so often this is in the base of itself, it's some version of it's a protection. It's a version of that perfectionist, and typically that does show up as either the arrogant and violent or abusive narcissist, but inside your own head, right? So we all have that sort of that inner critic or that inner judge that's like, Rob, you're a piece of shit. If you step out of line, Rob, or man, you were putting on some weight, you better hit that gym, right? Like those are the things that come in, right? And it's like that's the part that if you don't work with that, it's going to be like you cannot show Sanja that you got up this morning and you're like, man, I'm not doing well, right? And so that is that falsehood that you put out into the world, right? And that's that armor. You walk into work and you're armored up and everyone's like, how are you doing? You're like, I'm busy, but I'm crushing it. I sold $50 million yesterday and today I'm doing 100 and I have 16 CEOs on speed dial. And, and it's like, great, but it's not real. And people don't even like that. Like the superheroes that people like are not, it's not Superman because he has no flaws. It's Superman because he has kryptonite, because everybody can acknowledge that, you know what, nothing's perfect. And that's what creates the connection. And so there's actually this beautiful art form from Japan, and it's called kintsugi. And they take broken pottery and they repair it with gold.
Yeah.
And so the cracks are the gold, and it shows that the beauty is from the imperfection.
Yeah.
And that's life is there's wisdom in the suffering and in the pain, and not in the perfection, but in the imperfection.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. It reminds me, recently I bought this really cool mug it was handmade from like artisans in Argentina, and it had this beautiful flower painted on it, but very fragile. And I was like, oh, it's not gonna go well. But like I really wanted to use it. And sure enough, like after a couple of uses, I saw it and it had a chip in it. I was like, oh man. And then I thought, you know what? No, like now it's more real. Now it's like it has like this other like dimension and character to it. I didn't fix it with gold, but when I still look at it, like it does remind me of like the real life. And I'm like, this mug is still equally beautiful. Now I just went through some life with me. Got a little bit of chips, but it's okay. We're gonna, continue to enjoy our coffee, and it'll be fine, because that is life. So no, thank you for sharing that, because I do think that there are, sometimes I wonder, because there's, for the kind of work that we do, I feel like we surround ourselves with certain leaders. And then sometimes I think like, oh, but people like certainly know about vulnerability now and it's become a lot more common. Maybe, but it's not with everybody. And then I still meet people that are so guarded and everything's so great. And I'm like, I don't say this out loud because it's not my place, but I'm like, who are you bullshitting? Like, no way. Like, and then and to me, it almost like I don't want to engage with them very much because I start to lose some trust. I'm like, I don't need a show from you, but if that's what you need, that's okay. But it's hard for me to engage because if you're, all of this is amazing and everything's great, it's not. Like, that's not life. But if that's the persona you want to have, that's totally okay for you. It's just not necessarily like, I don't think somebody will enjoy my life. And so I just learned to move on. But there are still people out there. And I think for me, part of the reason why I still talk about this is because I do believe they carry a big burden. And I think it is really hard to mask and not want to talk about it and have all these things. And I'm not saying that you have to talk about everything all the time or that you owe everybody explanation about every part of your life. There's a time and a place. But when it is such a perfection and everything's amazing, it's like, what drugs are you taking? I don't know. Like, what did you have before lunch? So
It's
I wanted to, yeah.
You mentioned it, right? Is there's a time and place, right? Nobody is saying go to your team and be like, this business is falling apart.
Yeah, right.
I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm millions of dollars in debt. And, right? No one is saying that, right?
Yeah.
Find the context. There are so many of my clients who say to me, I feel isolated. I feel alone. I feel like I'm the only person that I am carrying this weight of this business. I'm trying to hold all my employees employed because I care about their families. And, the tariffs changed, or, my client's not paying me or whatever. And I'm holding it all together and I have no one to talk to except for you, Rob.
Yeah.
That's the context.
Yeah.
Is find somebody like me, find somebody like a therapist, find somebody like Sanja. They're not going to judge you. They're there to support you. That's what you need, because carrying it all yourself, it only ends in one way. And that's you hitting that limit that I've hit, that I'm sure a lot of people have hit. You're going to burn out. You're going to crack. And picking yourself up from that takes so much time. But if you nip it in the bud, then it doesn't even turn into anything.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I'm sure it's always a work in progress. And I think for people who are listening, they're like, but I feel like I've been like this my whole life. It's so hard to change. It is, but it's possible. And it takes steps and it takes time and it takes the willingness to have that conversation. And to your point, maybe you first find a neutral third party that it's easier to share with than maybe feeling like you're sharing a burden internally. And then the more you open up, you start to realize what are some things that are maybe private and not everything needs to be shared with everyone, but what are some things even inside your organization that are maybe better left side? Because even to your example, if an organization is not doing well and if clients aren't paying, you don't want to worry everybody, but at the same time, maybe somebody can help, or maybe they can prepare, or maybe you don't want to not tell anyone. And then all of a sudden you have to lay off 30% of your staff and nobody saw it coming because it was never discussed. So they're different cultures, they're different philosophies, they're different approaches. But I do think taking some steps towards that openness, and to your point, maybe if you're a more seasoned professional and you handle things a certain way your whole life and you're not willing to just like jump and completely change all at once, there are these steps, like you were saying, more neutral third parties that would make a great progress towards the right path.
Where I always start with folks, again, is, and you can use I'm human for this, right? Is instead of thinking about it as asking for help, is asking for advice. Mm-hmm. And this is also the greatest career tip out there. But when you start, like, of course, you want to have something that you want to achieve, and let's say you want to get promoted, right? If I look on the outside like I know everything and I don't need help and everything's going great, I'm missing out on opportunities to actually get to the next level, because I'm probably not even talking about that I want to get to that level, or maybe I want to switch into a different department, or what do I actually want to achieve?
Yeah.
But if I find, okay, I want to move to this department and I want to get a promotion, and Sanja is the executive vice president of that department, I can go to Sanja and go, hey Sanja, I really admire your career and I would love your advice on how can I get into your department or get into this position. And two things happen from this. One is everyone will give you great advice because everyone loves to give you advice,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Makes them feel good. Second thing is, subconsciously, we all want our advice to be right. This is the magic sauce, because the next time a job opens up, Sanja's going to go, oh, Rob wants this job. That's when the magic happens. And so, and if that feels like a lot, like you're like, hey, that feels scary to me, before you go and ask for that advice, is just take a deep breath, just acknowledge that fear. I'm human. And then take that step. Call that person that you want to ask for the sale. Ask that person on a date. Ask for the advice on getting a promotion or a raise. Ask for that job. Apply for that thing. Write that book. Do that TED Talk. Whatever you want to do it and take that step, because you know what? If you don't do it, no one's going to do it.
Yeah. I'm very much internalizing that advice right now. Thank you. As I hope our listeners are too. So I feel like, it's 2026. We can't have a whole conversation without me asking you anything about AI. So I'll ask you one thing and then we'll jump to something
It's
else.
going to kill us all.
I know. Sadly, I feel like AI is creating a lot of job insecurity, and we keep, reading about layoffs, companies pointing to AI. Isn't it? They're saying it is. So let's take it at face value, I guess, for now. So as AI creates job insecurity, HR teams are dealing with really massive internal chaos across the workforce. How can HR use your chaos tools to help employees stay grounded when their roles really are fundamentally changing?
The biggest thing here, right, is one is exactly what we talked about before, is the vulnerability, right?
Mhm.
Of course, I know that, you have rules on disclosure and all these things, but I've coached leaders through layoffs before, and I never tell them to lie to their people. If you're asked point blank, are you laying off people? Don't say no when you know the answer is yes, right? You can say, I can't tell you that, or, I don't have, whatever that is, but don't lie to your people. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, the second thing is like with AI, there's going to be adjustments, right? And we've seen this with technology, with internet, with everything. Jobs change. It doesn't necessarily mean it goes away. It means it could change. And so people need to be in this learning mode instead of this protection mode. And
Mhm.
that's where that tool of I'm human really helps. Because if you get that stress response, that fear of like, I'm going to lose my job, what happens is your amygdala shuts down the executive functioning of your brain. That
Mm.
means you lose logic, you lose decision making, you lose emotional regulation, you lose like innovation, creativity, learning. Basically, you're putting horse blinders on, right? That's why the world gets so dark.
Yeah.
And so just being able to manage the stress response with yourself and using that tool to help your team do it opens their brains, which opens their perspective. Then they can learn new things. They can learn, how can I use AI to do my job more effectively? Or what could I do that would add value to my company instead? Or what can I learn? That changes the question. Instead of this fight or flight, you're into problem solving, you're into innovation. And those
Yeah.
are the companies that are going to truly capitalize on chaos in this moment.
Yeah. I love that because I think there's so much advice that organizations need right now. There's so much happening, and everything is moving so quickly, and many people are terrified, rightfully so. Especially because you look at the news, you see these big headlines of what AI is doing. Then on the other hand, you hear of all the opportunities, but unfortunately, as humans, we're wired like more to be scared than to be optimistic or opportunistic, and so I do think that there's a lot for organizations to do because even internally, it is going to hurt. Like whether it hurts turnover, whether it hurts productivity, whether it really, most importantly, hurts mental well-being. It's something I think in 2026 we just absolutely have to focus on because I don't know. I don't believe any of us are really aware of what the repercussions truly could be if we don't. Like I think we have some ideas, but I believe it could be a lot more massive than what we think it could be.
This is why this time in history, at least in our lifetime, is unprecedented. And like the World Uncertainty Index tracks basically the number of times the word uncertainty is used in government documents around the world. And since the fall of 2024, we are up 330%. And since the peak of COVID, so the highest uncertainty got in COVID, which was somewhere in the range of 2021, we are 87% higher today. So we're almost twice as much uncertainty.
Oh, man.
And this stat that I'm giving you was before the stuff in Venezuela happened, right? And so this moment in time is the most chaos that we've ever been through. And so you learning how to take advantage of this moment or even survive through this moment without just being in this constant state of fear is the most critical time ever. And the companies who can help their people get out of that stress response so they can innovate and create, not only will those people be happier, more productive, more well-being, the engagement goes up, productivity, profitability, all that stuff goes up. They're also going to be the only companies that actually take advantage and survive where their competitors won't. And so this is the moment, folks.
I'm going to go back and listen and write those stats down that you said, because as terrifying as they are, I think they're also very eye-opening. And I'm going to, I think, also watch how many times I say uncertainty myself, because it's definitely increased for sure. So I'll ask you one more question before we wrap up, even though I have so many more. But as an organization that really leans into and we focus on employee listening as one of our core offerings, there's a lot of times when we learn about things that are going on in the organization and exit interviews because people maybe don't have psychological safety to say it, or whatever the reason is, it doesn't come out before. And a lot of times, it's too late for that person. Maybe it's not too late to take action and you still can. But whenever that happens with us or any one of our clients, I'm like, man, I wish we would this information would have been so much valuable before. We could have done so much more with it. How do you think HR can use your chaos tools to intervene, with these cultures, whether it's a leader or otherwise that comes out in the exit interview before really this talent drain begins?
So there's a couple stats I want to give you, right? Is having somebody who is a toxic employee doesn't even not necessarily mean to be a manager. They are 9 times more costly than just a disengaged person, right?
Yeah.
So they're actively working against your goals, but they're also poisoning effectively the people around them too. And we've seen this. I had a client and they had one of those abusive narcissistic people as the department head. That person poisoned their entire department of I think it was a few thousand people, as well as their people were so scared of the leader that they were actively poisoning the other departments that they worked with on projects.
Wow.
And so it's not like, oh, well, it's just their team of, 10. It's like, no. This ripples into the organization.
Yeah.
That's why this stuff's so important. But as the leader, as the HR department, once you start to figure this stuff out, is often we go, well, this person's a great performer, or they have a lot of
Mhm.
organizational power, so there's nothing we can do. We need to move beyond that. The whole point, and why I'm sure you all got into HR, is we're human first.
Mm.
And the cost to humanity of these poor leaders is not only what I went through where I almost lost my life, but it's exactly what we talked about is toxic cultures, increase of depression 300%. The cost on people's well-being is incredibly high. As we talked about before, 120,000 deaths per year in the United States, right? It's mental health, it's physical health, and that ripples not only into those people's lives, but also their families and the community. And so, if we want to step up and be good for the world, it starts with us being good leaders, and we got to walk the walk.
Yeah. Rob, thank you so much. I enjoyed your book immensely. And like I said at the beginning, I really loved all the combination. Even in our conversation today, you brought up so much research, so many stats, which I think are very eye-opening and also bring a lot of credibility to your opinions, to your recommendations. And then I love all the
I'm an
personal
engineer at
stories.
heart, right? I
I know,
gotta have
but
my data.
and I guess for being a researcher and PhD, like you're speaking right to my heart. So I'm like, this is amazing. But I know for a lot of people, a lot of times, like if you want to make change or if you want to convince, the combination of data and really warmth and personal story and passion is what moves the needle. And so I've loved that in your book. I love that in our conversation today. I'm so grateful that our paths cross. I'm so grateful for what you're doing. Like I wish I could like clone you. Maybe I should be careful what I wish for because maybe AI is not that far from it. And like we'll talk in a few years and there'll be like 10 Robs. Maybe not a bad
I
thing.
hope
Like right now
not.
it sounds a little creepy, but maybe it'll be good. So for our listeners, and we'll put this into our podcast description and everything, but who'd love to follow your work or get in touch with you to learn more about it, and find a copy of your book. Where are you? What's the best way to get in touch with you? Where are
Yeah, I
you
mean,
virtually? I don't know if anyone's gonna. I mean, I'm sure people would love to fly down to Costa Rica or up or over, depending on where they are. But virtually, how can people find you?
I mean, my dream, I think I told you this before, but my dream is to do some retreats this year. So if you wanna do a leadership corporate retreat in Costa Rica, let me know. Um, but yeah, for the book, obviously Amazon, Barnes and Noble, wherever you get them. It's also on Audible. It's audiobook. It's on I think 120 different platforms audio, so you can find it. Capitalizing on Chaos. Um, for me, best place to find me, at least on social media, is my LinkedIn. It's just Rob Kalwarowsky. You won't be able to spell that, so Sanja will put it in the podcast notes. And then my website, robkalwarowsky.com. And yeah, like if you want to reach out, I do one-on-one coaching, I do group coaching, I also do keynote speaking or workshops. So I'd love to help you with your chaos needs.
Well, thank you so much, Rob. Thank you for all that you do, and thank you so much for your time today. And thank
Thanks
you
for
for all
having
the
me.
listeners. Talk to you soon. Take care, Rob. Take care, everyone.